I did it, everybody. I cracked the code on Star Wars. I researched the writing processes of every Star Wars movie, and I have right here the formula for what makes a good Star Wars script, and ultimately, a great film. So let's try this theory on for size and find out why some films are masterpieces of art, and others are... Anyways, then I'll show you scientifically why Episode 9 is gonna be awesome. Now real quick, if you like film or fantasy videos, stuff like that, hit that thumbs up or subscribe to the channel here at Art Badger. Or you can always follow us on Twitter. So, I had an epiphany in my research into Star Wars storytelling, which I'm basically always doing. I looked at who wrote each script, when they were written, the content, of course, and what the purpose was for making each Star Wars movie, like revamping the franchise or offering new viewpoints onto events we'd already seen. Now we know it takes hundreds of people and hundreds of millions of dollars to make a Star Wars film. But here's my pitch as to what every Star Wars script needs in order to become the best film it can be. Now, every single Star Wars movie, and maybe like all big movies like this, especially action movies, need these two forces. One writer to contribute to the story and major plot points, big ideas like that, big set pieces. And another writer who works on the dialogue, intimate details, and the minutiae. I think of it as having one, a story or concept writer, that would be George Lucas most of the time, and two, a details or dialogue writer, and that would be Lawrence Kasdan a lot of the time, but not always. Now, if they have people in each of those forces that are experienced and very skilled in their art form, then it'll be the best movie it can be. Now let's look at the original trilogy. Obviously, George Lucas helped the writing on the stories of each of the movies, but Lawrence Kasdan was usually the go-to writer in terms of love dialogue within the movies, or really just ones where they were trying to preserve natural, relationships, clever wording, and foster the real kinds of character growth that we want to see in each movie. Now, on the other hand, George Lucas and Lee Brackett, writers like that, would be focusing more on the major events of the movie. Lee Brackett was an experienced sci-fi writer, so she was able to add a lot of great set pieces and different things to the story. And of course, George Lucas had a lot of help from Kurosawa in the set pieces for his own stories. Now, the funniest part to me is that the best Star Wars movie in the original trilogy, which basically everybody agrees on, is Empire, George Lucas only got a story by credit on. So really the one that he was the most hands-off on was the best script. But anyways. Now, onto the prequels. Now in the prequels, it was George Lucas alone doing all of the story and the dialogue and the minutiae for all the scripts. And that kind of shows you why it's really on par with the only other time that he did that, which is Return of the Jedi. Now we can see from here that George Lucas is great at showing these huge battles. He's great at having a lot of action-packed scenes and new set pieces and new planets. But with the small details and of course the dialogue, that's where he falls short. Now the sequel trilogy is on the opposite spectrum as George Lucas. This is J.J. Abrams and other writers making their own new stories for Star Wars, and they had the opposite problem. They knew how to make great dialogue and plot points in the film, but none of it's interesting or unique or new set pieces we haven't seen before. Their scripts are clever and well written, and they know how to tell stories, they just don't know how to tell a new Star Wars story. Especially with Episode 7, they're too worried about having us think, oh, this isn't Star Wars-y enough, so they didn't really stray very far in terms of big ideas. Now, with Last Jedi, it's really the opposite, with Rian Johnson having ideas that were too big, and not being reined in, a little bit too unfocused in his storytelling, so that there's just so much in here that wasn't really needed. Depending on who you talk to, they might say that's different things, but the point is, he didn't kill his darlings. Now, as a side note, this is another example where there's a single person being put in charge of the entire story responsibilities for the whole film and franchise at that point, which is what had happened with all the prequels, so just really anytime you're doing that with such a huge film as this, you kind of know you're gonna fail. Now, in this scale, if they're all the way in the center, and they've made skilled decisions because they're an experienced writer, then it's gonna have the best Star Wars experience. As an added note, I think the anthology films fit these too, but those are a little bit more controversial. Anyways, now what does this tell us about Rise of Skywalker? Here are the two writers of Rise of Skywalker. We have J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. J.J. Abrams was instrumental in creating the story, characters, and dialogue of Episode 7. Now, Batman v Superman's Chris Terrio. Whether you enjoy the work of Chris Terrio or not, he might be the perfect person to fulfill the role of the big picture, big set piece person for these stories. While not all these stories were very successful, I think they had some huge ideas in there. He could do a great job on this. If they both know what their roles are, J.J. Abrams is working on the small stuff and the dialogue, and Chris Terrio is working on the big stuff and giving crazy big ideas that have never been in a Star Wars movie before. Then we'll have the best movie we can. But there might be a little bit of a failing here, because we do know that J.J. Abrams contributed to the not fully three-dimensional characters of Episode 7, just like Chris Terrio did in Justice League. It's my guess, because of this, that this movie will be much better than Episodes 7 and 8. I'm gonna guess it's an 8.5 out of 10. Anyways, that's enough out of me. That's how I see the franchise so far, and that's why I think Rise of Skywalker is gonna have an awesome story. And it's gonna have some really, really fun shots and set pieces. If you disagree with me, awesome. Tell me why in the comments. Clearly I love discussing Star Wars. What are you excited for in Rise of Skywalker? What do you think about bringing back Palpatine? I always think that they're just making more problems for themselves and then solving them and being like, yeah, we did it. But in this instance, it's one that we already solved and then they bring it back. Anyways, could be cool. I don't know. I'll give it a chance. Thanks for watching. If you want, like this video, subscribe. I want to do tons more videos like this. It's already been so fun. If you prefer social media, follow us on Twitter at @ArtBadgerPod. Now have an awesome day. I'm going to go stand in line for the next 2 months until Episode 9 comes out. I'm going to get good seats, even if it kills me.